Valerie. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and welcome to Wyoming.
Oh, yes.
Not your first time out to the Cowboy State, or
Uh,
is it?
no, I was here years ago when my husband took me out here to meet his family.
Oh, okay.
So, which was a culture shock.
Yeah.
I'm a city girl, so when I got here, I was like, very different.
My mom was the same way, like driving out here to drop me off for college. I mean, we were on probably Highway 287. I don't know which way you came in, but
Um, which way did we come in? From Riverton.
from Riverton. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, similar thing on 789. I mean, my mom was looking around and she said, there's no buildings. We're lost. My dad said, we're still on the road. Like,
So that was when we were driving in last night and he turned off his brights. I was like, "Do you know where you're going?"
Mhm.
I'm like, "Can you see?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely a culture shock out here.
Right. Right. You grew up in Florida or you grew up in another part of the East Coast?
No, so I was born and raised in Long Island. So I'm a city girl.
Yeah, my mom's from Queens.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
What
So
part of Long Island?
Suffolk County,
Okay, sure. Sure. So,
Holbrook,
yep. Yep.
and my most of my family's in Lake Ronkonkoma, Patchogue area.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So my dad retired out of police department
Yep.
and we uprooted and moved to Florida.
Okay.
So I did my high school years there. I did a year of college, got myself in a lot of trouble.
Ooh, there's stories there.
Oh, yes, plenty of stories. And then decided I was going to join the Navy, which to my parents was like a culture shock for them because I don't do well with authority. And so I joined the Navy and I thought, okay, I'm only going to do like 4 or 5 years just to prove a point to my family. Because when somebody tells me I can't do it, I'm like, I'm just going to prove a point. Somehow I ended
And the
up
point is you're wrong.
exactly. And then 24 years later, here I am. So, and this is my first time back in Florida since then. So I was in Florida for about 5 years, left Florida, haven't been back, and now I'm back.
Gotcha. Wow. So your husband's family's still here in Wyoming?
He's got some family here. He's got family, yeah, here and in Utah.
Okay, very good. Gotcha.
So
And do you have family still on Long Island?
I do.
Okay,
Well, most of my family is there.
sure.
And we have some in my parents, and some of my cousins live in Florida.
Gotcha.
So, but mainly everybody is in New York. I don't know why they stay in New York, but they choose to.
Oh, I mean, my cousin took me into Brooklyn and Manhattan as well. But I mean, I don't know how you feel about the city, but when I was in Brooklyn, I do remember thinking, as much as I live here in Wyoming and love it, oh, I get it, right? I mean, there's just this energy to New
Yeah.
York where you feel like you can find anything your imagination puts together. Jonathan Franzen once wrote that he lived in New York. He was a struggling writer. He said, I couldn't afford it, but I still lived in New York. He said, because it's the only place where you can be where there's no reason to be anywhere else.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yes. I loved living there. It's the seasons. I love the seasons, but the cold's not for me.
ooh, okay.
So I need humidity and heat year round.
Wow.
So
Okay. Wyoming's not for you.
no, no. Well, I got off the plane. And I was like, okay, I can't breathe through this cold.
Right.
So
Right. And it's dry.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
I tell everyone to bring chapstick. It's true. Yeah. Even if I go home for a week, even me, I'll go home for a week. My parents are in Vermont now.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah.
That's a beautiful area.
Oh, it is. Yes. I was very spoiled growing up. I didn't realize how I lived in this paradise 6 months of the year. And then 3 months of the year, it was gray and cold and snowy. And, you sort of, you wish you were in Florida, I guess I should
Yes.
say. So, but no, Vermont's wonderful. So you're involved in some really amazing work.
Hmm.
Can you give a summary for us?
So I started out when I left the military, um, connecting resources, just traveling, looking for military resources, because I found that the military, we had some mental health resources in the military, but not enough to provide our sailors. And so when I got out, I was determined to find all these extra resources that I can to help them cope with, depression or the number of suicides that were going on. And I came across a company and I started working for them and building their military program. And then I left that company and now I'm with the company that I'm with. And what I do is I travel all over the US, and I connect the VA and the military bases, so both active duty and veterans, with resources that are out in the community. So they don't have to always go through the VA or through the military bases. And a lot of them choose not to.
Hmm.
So,
I'm curious if we know the suicide rate of military veterans compared to the general population.
well, so they say 22 a day for veterans, but it's actually a lot. That number's a lot larger than 22 because you have to account for the homeless population. So they don't have that number. And you have to account for the number of, that people don't report. So a day is just an average, but that number's a lot larger.
Okay,
To the population, I don't have that number for the
gotcha.
general
I'd be
population.
curious. Yeah, yeah. So this is something I've wondered for a long time. Uh, you're in large cities. Unfortunately, you see the guy with the puppy and the battered green jacket sitting on the corner, military vet, right? I guess I've always been curious. Okay, so you were in an organization that demanded the most organization, the most discipline, the most regular habits of you, presumably for years.
Yeah.
How does that turn into, oh my gosh, he's two or three, misfortunes away from being dead. He's on the street. He's got nothing going for him. I mean, can you give us a like a typical story of, you exit the military and then you end up really in the worst circumstances?
So we are trained, given somebody, so say in my situation, 24 years of a certain to be a certain way, right? They break you down in boot camp and they build you up to what they want you to be. So you think a certain way, you act a certain way, and now you come to that 24-year mark of where you're going to retire. Now, all the deployments, all the unfortunate circumstances that you've been in, whether it be a traumatic event, you know, you don't get time to really process those things. What they teach you is to compartmentalize. So, like for me, I've had a lot of sailors that committed suicide. As a leader, I can't let any one of my sailors, my junior sailors, see me break down. I have to be that rock. So I have to help them get through this process. But at the same time, I can't let them really grieve because I need them to get back to the mission. So I have to teach them to also compartmentalize
Yeah.
and get through this,
Yep.
right? So you think of years of doing this, right? Now you get out. Well, right before we get out, we have what's called TAPS GPS, which is a program mandated by Congress for us to have, which started off as a week-long class, is now down to 3 days. And what it is, it's to prepare us for civilian life. Well, if you think of somebody who did 24 years of military programming, 3 days of programming preparing you to become a civilian.
You're not going to unwind 24 years in 72 hours.
No, there's absolutely no way. And they're cramming all this information down your throat at once. And you're trying to take in all this stuff. And then they're like, the very next day, they rip that uniform off and they're like, best of luck.
Right.
Right. So take any one of these military service members and you send them out. And now they just lost their complete identity.
Mm,
And they're trying to figure all this out. And at the same time, they're trying to process all their traumas and trying to figure out their identity. And now they have to figure out how to navigate the VA system, right?
gotcha.
So they have all this going on. And a lot of them don't know how to process or how to manage or how to even handle any of this. So what happens is they go back to what they know how to do, and which is either drinking or taking drugs um, or they end up just becoming homeless,
Hmm.
because they don't know how to manage money. Because if you think about it, we've had healthcare our entire military career.
Hmm.
We never had to really truly dealt with,
Not the deductible.
taxes or any of these things, right? Or deductible or finding care or any of these things. They don't teach us this when we get out, you know? And then we're thrown out onto the streets and they're like, okay, become a civilian. And so they end up going into the hiding and going out into the woods or going out and nobody prepares us for that. And that's what you see is these guys out on the street. And yeah, and it's unfortunate.
Hmm.
And so, and a lot of these guys in the military, you know, that stigma of going and getting mental health is always going to be there. I mean, we come a long ways, but that stigma is always going to be there. So you take a guy and we have a military deployment. He's not going to go and say, I have depression. He's not going to say that because it puts us on downtime. It takes us out of the mission. So they don't ever get care. And if we take any medications, that takes us out of the mission. And they don't want to be looked on, and none of us want to be looked down on, like we can't, complete a mission or we're weak or, we have a problem. So they don't get the help they need. And then if they do, it's always towards the end of our deployment or the end of our career, because now we're trying to get our claim taken care of through the VA. And then what they do is they just pile all this medication on and we become addicted to meds. And the VA doesn't help any because they just, when we get into the system, they're giving us more meds. And then we become addicted to those meds and it's just it's a slippery slope.
It sounds as if you're describing the system as essentially broken, or maybe it's just poorly designed from the start.
Um, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both.
Wow.
So, and that's what I've come across. Like I've met so many people in my field. Um, I have a lot of friends who work in as social workers or peer support, and they tell their stories. And a lot of them have been in Iraq or Afghanistan, and either lost a limb or been in a traumatic, um, incident, and they become, drugs was their way of becoming numb,
Hmm.
and and eventually they seeked help and now they're part of the system, the nonprofits or these programs to help other people and tell their story. But it took them to get away out of the VA, away from the VA, and into these community cares to get help and realize that, medication isn't always the answer. Therapy is out there and camaraderie and other ways of dealing with it. So,
Right. So the VA in its approach to vets' needs is affected by the Western American medical culture, which says identify a problem, identify a prescriptive, a medicine that can address those symptoms, right? And not that America doesn't have any other alternatives when it comes to healthcare, but it seems to me that that's the dominant attitude in American medicine, and that spills over into how the VA then approaches things.
I think a lot of the um, VAs, it's more of putting a Band-Aid on it than treating the actual problem.
Is it more expensive to treat the actual problem? Like, is it faster to put the Band-Aid on? Like, what's the motivation to not dig a little deeper and get to the root of the issue?
So there's issues with, and this again, what I've learned over the years of dealing with the VAs is a lot of them are understaffed.
Okay.
Um, they don't have the programming. Um, if we go back to before COVID, a lot of what they were doing when COVID started is they were using community care. And so community care is supposed to be an extension of the VA and not a replacement. It's supposed to just be an extension of. And so when they were short-staffed and didn't have the capability, they were able to refer out. And so these veterans were able to get counseling, different modalities like EMDR and inpatient, outpatient care. So instead of having to take all these meds or wait for care, they were actually getting the treatment that they needed.
Okay. This is pre-COVID.
Yes, all through COVID. And then now, fast forward to now, all that stopped. So now we're in a situation where we're back to where we started, where now they pulled them all back into the VA, and veterans aren't having the opportunity to utilize that community care. Um, they're waiting on wait list. They're back to taking medications. A lot of them are um, drinking themselves to death or committing suicide, um, not getting the care that they need. Where it's almost like we took 2 steps forward and now we're taking 10 steps back. So,
Uh, and can you point to a certain, was there an administration change, budget cuts, a change in culture somewhere?
so I would say, before Trump's first term, there was a lot of issues with the VAs, a lot of issues. Trump came in his first term and revamped all of the VA system and the processes. Um, when Trump left, a lot of that went downhill again. Um, we had COVID. We still were using the community care, and then things started getting because the VA we went into $1 billion deficit. Um, their idea of fixing things, was pulling the veterans back in. Again, this is just my opinion. Okay. So, and as a veteran, this is how, I mean, not just me, but a lot of veterans feel.
Mhm.
Was their way of fixing things was they pulled us in, weren't allowing us to get the community care that we needed. Um, the whole idea behind community care when it came into effect, right? So there's what's called the Mission Act. And the Mission Act is supposed to put veterans in the driver's seat of their care, of their treatment, and deciding whether they want to stay in the VA system or go out into community care. Well, a lot of them didn't want to wait because, again, staffing, or maybe there wasn't the care provided there, or maybe it was just over, there wasn't any room. So take, for instance, commissary might be overpacked. So there might be a 30, 60, 90-day wait to get into the inpatient setting. So instead of waiting, they could go out to community care. But now you're on a wait list.
And community care refers to Local therapists, local hospitals with
Yes.
no particular association with Veterans Affairs
No,
who
we are.
might be paid through Veterans Affairs admin for.
Yes. So community care, typically you're either in network or out of network.
Mhm.
Um, but you're, if you're in network, you're contracted through the VA. And what happens is if you decide, like for me, I would talk to my social worker, I'd say, or my provider, and I say, you know what? I don't want to wait for care. It's either, longer than 30 days or it's, the drive from, point A to point B is more than, 50 miles and I choose to go out in town and here's where I choose to go. I want to go here. And they say, okay, so they'll put in a referral to community care. Community care is a case manager. They look over it, they approve it, and they give authorization. And they say, yes, you can go to X, Y, and Z. And then once they give that authorization, I call that facility and I say, I'm coming to you. And then I go and I receive care there. That's how that works. But that
Gotcha.
doesn't work that way anymore. So typically, if I call now, they'll say, no, you're not going there. We have a place here in town. You can go to our commissary and you'll get a bed within 30 to 60 days. And you
30
will.
to 60 days, but this is might be while you are wrestling with suicidal urges. This might be while you're wrestling with a raging substance problem. Like if you could look at your own situation, you might say to them, I don't have 30 days. I might be dead in a week. I might kill myself in 2 days. Like I can't wait 30 to 90 days. Like, is that the, not that people are saying this, maybe they don't have that self-recognition, but that might be the situation.
So in substance use, yes. So what they'll do is they'll put them on a wait list and then they'll say, well, but we could put you in outpatient somewhere. But I'm drinking now, and outpatient isn't going to help me because I'm going to drink myself to death, right? But when it comes to suicide, it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
So we have what's called the Compact Act, and the Compact Act says that I can go anywhere I want to, choose any place I want to because I'm actively suicidal, and the VA will cover it.
Okay.
However, there's criteria that I have to meet. I have to have 100 days, 2 years active duty. I have to, if I'm National Guard or Reservist, I have to have 100 days, boots on ground at some point. Um, and I have to be discharged with anything other than dishonorable discharge. So you have somebody that's actively suicidal and they come in. How do you ask somebody like that? Hold up, I know you're suicidal, but did you serve 2 years?
Right.
Were you dishonorable discharge or were you honorably discharged? It gets a little hard. So you're kind of taking a chance when somebody comes in. You just automatically assume, like, you don't even ask, you just take them in.
Sure.
Um,
Right, but that is hard. It's like, hey, hold on, hold on. Before we help you, you got to answer these questions.
yeah,
I have a checklist.
yeah.
Jeez.
So typically you just take them in and they can go anywhere that they choose to, when it's actively suicidal. And they can go into, any acute crisis place. It has to be acute crisis or acute stabilization or any ER. And they'll take them in and the VA will cover it. It does not matter. Um, but once they complete that and they need further care, they have to go back to the VA and wait, which is crazy because now you just got them stabilized, but you expect them to wait now for care. And so what makes you think that they're not going to go back into actively being suicidal? Now they got to wait for 30 days of care. So now I will say this, there's a lot of amazing people in the VA. There really is. And I've met a lot of them. It's just that the system is just broken.
Okay.
And that's the problem.
Okay. Right. Right. You might be willing to work as hard and as long as you physically can and mentally can in order to help these people. But if you're being told, no, we can't treat them in a certain way, or there's simply more of them than you can actually get to, you're you're handicapped even as someone who's trying to help.
Right. So
Right.
that's the problem for a lot of, like, for me, my team, and a lot of other people that are trying to do right by these veterans is, you know, we can only do so much, but we constantly have doors slammed on us and go, no, you can't do that. No, we're not going to let you do that. So
Is it underfunding? Is it bureaucratic red tape? Is it both?
it's both.
It's both. Of course it
It's
is. It's
both.
always both. Yeah.
It's both.
Okay. So, Veterans Affairs answers to the ultimately to the Secretary of Defense.
Um, so we have, oh God, what is his name? Doug Collins,
Okay.
who's the secretary of the VA secretary.
Okay.
He was just put in there not too long ago by Trump.
Hmm.
Um, he was originally from Georgia. He ran the VAs out in Georgia. He is pretty amazing. And he's talked about, he's a true veterans advocate. And I know he is going to do a lot of amazing things. And I kind of talked to you a little bit about this earlier. Um, Nothing's going to happen overnight. You're talking years of, this process of this degradation, these issues that we've had didn't happen overnight. So it's going to take time to fix. Um, but he's going to be the one, that's going to make these changes. And we have a lot of people in the Senate, that are trying to make these changes too. So ultimately, um, with Trump in place, and then him, and then like I mentioned, Jay Collins and a lot of other
Jay
people.
Collins. Okay. Is that the name?
So Jared Collins, who
Jared
is
Collins.
the state senator for out in Florida.
Oh, okay.
No, he's a Republican.
Mhm.
He was just advocating a couple nights ago in the Senate for yeah, he's Florida. Um, Talking about what was that saying that he just said? When Florida leads, America wins. I thought it
Ah.
was the greatest saying. Not that I'm biased or anything because I'm from Florida, but I just think it's one of the greatest sayings.
Yeah.
Um, but he's a veteran himself, and you know and he sees the struggles that veterans go through, and it's sad when people like myself, who knows how to navigate through the VA, and I struggle, and I'm not going through substance use and all that other stuff. Now, given somebody who is going through mental health issues and substance use, how do you expect them to navigate?
Right.
How do
And
you
you have all this
expect?
experience navigating the system. These people,
Yes,
in addition to having the issue they're trying to deal with, they are also novices at this
yes,
bureaucratic structure.
yes, yes. And here they are, and they have claims that they're trying to put in, and they're constantly getting stonewalled, and that's what he's trying to fight for. And so, and then you wonder why they give up. They give up, and they don't even get any health care from the VA, and they just end up going on the streets because it's just easier for them to just give up.
It's easier, it's simpler, it's familiar.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Wow. I'm
crazy.
Yeah, I'm curious if we have understandings of the rates of PTSD in other conflicts. Do we know how many people were dealing with it during the Korean War, during the Second World War, or do we not really keep, do we not really have an understanding of this issue until the Vietnam era or Desert Storm?
Um, I don't think they probably kept track of it as well as they do now.
Okay.
Um, but if you think back, it was probably huge back then. but we didn't, it wasn't talked about back then.
Sure.
Because if you think about it, you know, mental health back then was not even a discussion. You know, men came back from wars and, you know,
Yeah, you self-medicated with alcohol,
yep.
or maybe something worse, or maybe you didn't really need to self-medicate. But I think, at least from knowing my extended family, who many of them did serve, it does seem like alcohol was the popular self-medication.
It was. It was. Um, and it was the norm. It was
Sure,
considered the norm,
sure.
you know. If you think back to, to that era, I mean, it was normal for them to drink throughout the workday and you know, I mean, shoot, think about our sailors, our songs, drink to the foam, you know, that was part of our tradition, you know. And now here we are, we talk about it more, we discuss it more, we try to, talk to these sailors, about give them different avenues to, other than going out and partying. So,
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So, I want to dig down a little bit more into what you do day to day. So, are you on the administration side for these centers? Are you on the fundraising side for these centers? So, it seems to me that most of your work is with centers that treat veterans who are, for the most part, checking themselves in
mhm.
for recovery treatment. What role do you play in that?
So I'm the director of business development.
Okay.
And so I run a team of five, and they go out, and their job is to network and get to connect with all the different military bases and kind of build up the referrals and build up the relationships. And so this way, when they do get calls, they do the whole admissions and all that. Where I come in is I work with them, but I like to go out. So I do what I roll my sleeves up and I go out and do what they do. So prior to coming to this job, that's what I did. I was out there on the grind and so I still go out there and I network and I talk to my clients and I still maintain those relationships and I go and visit the different hospitals and talk to the veterans. And sometimes I get calls from the hospitals, whether it be the VA or acute crisis centers or maybe nonprofits, um, homeless shelters, and they ask me to help the veterans. And a lot of times I just get calls from the veterans themselves, and they tell me that they need help. Just the other day, I got a call from Chicago, which is I haven't been to. And it was from a veteran who got my information from another veteran that I helped. And they asked if I could help them. And they're currently in a commissary. And they wanted to know if I can get them over to my facility, that they're unhappy where they're at. And they want to finish their time there and they want to be able to get treatment over in Vegas.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, so you're going out, you're visiting hospitals in order to let those hospitals know we have resources to which you could refer patients
Right.
that are
I
not your
educate.
specialty.
Right.
Right.
So I educate them on what we can provide and how we can help them. So basically, um, the way I word it is I let them know that I'm an extra tool in their toolbox.
Hmm.
So, and I can be an information hub because I travel everywhere and I connect with so many different people. And it's not so much that they can use my facility because there's no cookie cutter treatment. And my facilities might not work for every veteran. And so I might get a call, and that veteran might not fit for my facility. So what I do is I work with so many other facilities across the US. But what I do is I vet them. And if it's not a facility that I would ever put myself or my family in, I would never put another veteran in. And so what I do is if they call me, is I'll let them know, okay, even though I say no to my facility, I'll give them options to other facilities in their area or other areas so that they have somewhere that they can go. I never just shut that door and say, sorry, no thanks, and send them on their way.
Mm-hmm.
So I always like to be able to provide them other resources. And some of them don't even want to go in inpatient. They call and they're like, well, I was thinking about it, but really what I want to do is just, find someone to talk to or do counseling or really they just want, they want to build up that camaraderie. They just feel like they're alone and isolated.
And that's something they probably had a abundance of in the military setting, despite all the difficulties that a military life might have. Probably companionship and a sense of belonging are usually not something that's lacking in that environment.
Absolutely
Typically,
not.
yeah.
But it's crazy. The minute you take off your uniform, all that stops. It stops. Nobody calls you. Nobody checks in on you. Like it's it's crazy how different it is. You feel like you're out on an island by yourself.
Right. You feel like you're an alien that's landed in a foreign world.
Yes,
Oh, this is the country I served, and it's not home. It's the country I served, but it's not home.
absolutely. That's I think that was my biggest difficulty because I'm used to running like 100 miles a minute and getting all these phone calls and feeling needed. I would have like 11, 12 o'clock at night. I'd have one of my enlisted call me up and be like, Chief, um, you were talking about college and I was thinking about college. And I'm like, at midnight? I'm like, okay. And you want to
Let's
talk about
talk
this?
about college. Sure.
Okay. Or I'd get phone calls and be like, Chief, um, I'm in jail. I'm like, okay, I'm coming to get you. I'm like, but this is going to be a long ride home
Hmm.
because you're going to get an earful, you know? And so I'm used to like always being needed. And then I walk out the door and my phone stops ringing, you know? And nobody needs me. Nobody's calling to check on me. Um, where my brothers and sisters were always there, they're not there anymore. And then you move and there's veterans out there, but you have no idea where they're at.
Right. And did they have a similar deployment? Did they have a similar assignment? Did they, right. Again, yeah. Yeah. They have some commonalities, but maybe not the ones you shared with the people on your same ship or at your same base doing the same job.
Right,
Hmm.
right. Well, and they tell you, they're like, oh, there's all these VFWs and there's these American Legions. And you go there. Well, I'm 48 years old, and these guys are like in their 60s, 70s, and they're old school, old timers, right?
Hmm.
And they're some of them are Vietnam vets, and they're all drinking and they're all outside smoking. And I'm like, okay.
This isn't really an environment that I was looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so different. And here I am, I'm like, and to me, I'm like, well, I feel young. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, this is not
I'm the
my,
kid on the block again.
yeah, yeah, it's so different. So, and not really, like I'll go and have a beer or two, but I'm not in there to get wasted and I'm not really wanting to. I go outside and try to talk to him for a little bit. I come back in and my husband's like, you smell like an ashtray.
Uh,
I'm like, I feel like one.
I feel like an ashtray, right? Right.
So,
Yeah. It's, I'm wondering if some of this, so the last time we had a conflict in which there was drafting was Vietnam.
mhm,
Ever since then, the military has been essentially a volunteer arm
mhm,
of the American nation. So I wonder if since Vietnam, we as the American people have been basically content to sort of delegate our wars to those willing to volunteer to fight them.
Mhm.
And we frankly would prefer to just carry on without really thinking too much about those guys who volunteered to go fight these conflicts. And in a way, we're treating I wonder if you agree with this, if in a way we treat our military the way we treat our plumber. We want them to do the job, but we don't want them to stay for dinner. And we want them to just take care of it and sort of stay out of our sight. And do you agree with that general feeling?
Um, I do to a point.
To a point. Okay.
Um, I think for the most part, people are like, well, as long as they're doing their thing and we're safe and they do what they need to do, you know? Um, up to a certain point. If you think back to the war, when we first started everything with, what was it, Iraq, Afghanistan?
Okay. So the invasion of Afghanistan, which
Yeah,
was 2002.
yeah, something about that. Nobody really thought about military, right? People were like, oh, they come in, they did their thing, whatever. And nobody really thought about us, right? And then all of a sudden, we're we're in war and we have 9/11, we had all these things going on, right? And we start invading, and then all of a sudden now people are concerned about us, and then I feel like now it's a totally different view, and then now we're back to where we were before, and now they don't really give two thoughts about us.
Right. Right. Yeah. Which gets more press time, the iPhone iPhone release or guys coming back out of Iraq?
Oh no, iPhone,
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
Easily. You know, if you remember when we had the whole war going on, it was always like they would have these Facebook and TV where they would surprise their kids coming home from the war, right?
Hmm.
And that was huge because the kids would have a breakdown because they think their mom and dad are deployed, and all of a sudden they'd come and surprise them in their classroom, right? That
Hmm.
was huge. You don't see that
You
anymore.
don't see that same awareness of
No.
interesting.
But we're out of that war, right? Where
Hmm.
they call it peacetime
Hmm.
right now.
Peacetime conflicts.
Yeah.
Another misnomer
Yeah.
for our culture. Yeah. It's a peacetime conflict.
So, um, it's just it's a different time right now, different military.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. I'd be curious more on this topic, but let's circle back to your work. So these centers, most of them are small, small client load, small patient load. What's the correct term here?
so we're 10 bed facilities.
10-bed facilities. Okay.
Yep. So small census.
Okay. Small census. Perfect.
Yes. So a typical facility that you would find is like a brick and mortar. It has more of an institutional feel. So, and those are usually like 30, 40 beds. Um, they got huge groups. Um, they have, they might see their providers occasionally, large groups going in and out. We are a much different feel. The idea
Mhm.
behind it is we have a house, right? So it's that less institutional feel, less hospital feel, more of a home feel. Um, and this way, they can build that camaraderie between a small group. Um,
Okay. It
so
doesn't feel like they're walking into a hospital ward.
exactly. So they feel like they're going to be treated as a person and not as their diagnosis. So when they walk in, there's either one or two to a bedroom. They have their own bathroom suite. They're not walking through like a cafeteria, like carrying a tray.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They actually have a kitchen, a chef. They sit around a dining room table and they talk. They get to build that camaraderie, get to know each other. Because the idea behind it is when they leave, we want them to all stay in touch. We want them to feel like when they leave, they have somebody that they can stay, they can talk to,
Okay.
and they're not alone. And because we have a internist on board. We have two DNPs, which is nurse practitioners with their doctorates in psych, and we have nursing, behavioral health techs, social workers, clinical social workers. And because we're so small, they have that clinical freedom of being able to tailor their treatment specifically to each veteran. So no one veteran's going to have the same treatment, which is beautiful because then again, if you take a large setting, you can't do that. You're kind of farming them through, and then farming them back out. Um, the idea behind us is we don't want them to come back. You do your treatment, you do your time, and you're set, you're treated, and you follow your treatment plan,
Yep.
and you don't come back.
Okay. Right. I never want to see you again.
Yeah.
And it's
So,
true. Gotcha. And so when you say you hope they have someone to stay in touch with, are you talking about whoever was directing their treatment plan, or you're hoping they stay in touch with the other nine members
yeah, the other
of
group
their
that they're
treatment
going
group?
through in their treatment group. We do have an alumni. So Dusty runs our alumni. So, she stays connected with them and she tries to keep them connected with the other veterans that go through our program.
Hmm.
And she'll stay in touch with them for an entire year. So she tracks them. So even when they complete our program, she's always making sure that they're staying on their outpatient, their aftercare programming, and they're doing what they're supposed to. But that only goes so far because if I want to block you and I don't want to talk to you, I can easily do that.
Right, right.
Um,
You never have to pick up the phone.
Exactly, exactly. But you'd be surprised. A lot of them that go through our programming stay in touch with us. Alana is she's a combat army vet. She runs our combat track and our military sexual trauma track. And a lot of them like to stay in touch with her because she's just amazing.
Sure.
So you find that a lot of veterans they're more open to talk with other veterans who've been through the same kind of process and trauma that they have. So she's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm wondering if what you're providing, could that just become a standard discharge process? Like, hey, anyone getting out of this type of military service, and I don't mean if that's, I don't mean, does that mean if you were in a combat zone or if you were deployed? But anyone meeting these criteria, you're going through this, and is it typically like a month-long program?
Ours is, we like to say 45 days because
45.
you
Okay.
really can't treat anything
6 days, 6
within.
weeks.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
So
mean, you're just touching the surface really.
yeah.
Um,
So could
but
you say like, all right, anyone being discharged from a service term that included a deployment or combat, you're doing this program. Like you don't have a choice. That's the last 45 days of your military service. Like would that help?
um,
Or you have to think that you have a problem. So you have to be
I
open.
wouldn't mandate it
Okay.
because I think everybody deals with trauma differently. And some people don't even have any trauma, they might not have been deployed, or maybe they were only forward deployed to like Japan or something. Um, I think everybody processes things differently. So I think it just depends on the situation, you know. But that's where the VAs come in place. And, if there is somebody that needs help, let them go and get the help that they need. Don't restrict them to one place only and then tell them that they have to wait, you know.
30 to 90 days. I mean, that's just wild.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
Right.
I know.
Right. Because there's a bar open tonight or there's a drug dealer on speed dial tonight,
Yeah.
right? They're not waiting 30 to 90 days.
No, and it's crazy. I've got one veteran that I've been helping, and his drug of choice is meth. And he's like, well, he's like, if I have to wait, then I'm just gonna go get messed up until that time. And I'm like, that's a horrible decision.
Yeah.
He's like, but why? He's like, I'm not gonna, stay sober.
Right. So you're saying it's a horrible decision, but if we know the system that we have and its limitations and its inefficiencies, it's actually an understandable decision,
Right.
as horrible as it is.
It is horrible, but yes.
Huh.
Yeah. But you see it all too often. So, like, I have a young lady that Kristen was working with, and but that me and her were working with, and she is on fentanyl and xylazine, which is like a horse tranquilizer, and it's common. And she cannot get off of it. And if she tries to detox, she actually goes into cardiac arrest.
Whoa.
Yeah, every single time without fail. And she's been trying to get over to us. And the VA just won't approve her referral. And so we told her if she
And
goes into an ER, um, she needs to detox in an ER, and we'll talk with the ER and we'll get that referral. So she's tried a couple times, but before she even makes it to the ER, she ends up trying to detox on her own. And then we get a call from the police department because they find her in cardiac arrest, put her on a ventilator, and then we get a phone call because they find our card in her pocket. And then we try to talk to the VA, and they're like, no.
and when you say the VA, this is someone who is assigned to review the cases that come across from a certain geographical area, from people who served in a certain branch during certain years. Like who's the person that says no, and why is it even them who's reviewing it? Like I don't understand how that review process even works.
So each VA has a community care team that's assigned to them.
Yeah.
And that community care team is made up of several case managers. And they they cover certain, like, they have what's called VISMs, and VISMs cover certain counties, right? And if you look at it like from a tier point, you have a VAMC, that's a veteran medical center, and the medical center has multiple community-based outpatients that fall under it that's spread out throughout counties. Um, and so veterans will go into those little outpatient centers, some will go to the main VA, but up in the VAMC is where the community care team resides.
VAMC, so Veteran Affairs Medical Center.
Yep.
Okay.
And they're the ones that are the gatekeepers for those authorizations, for those referrals.
That medical team. That's
Yes.
sort of at the center of the web, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. And they're gatekeepers to care centers like yours, but
Yes.
also other types of care that might be both inpatient and outpatient
Yes.
platforms.
Yes.
Wow. So you
And
got to have
they're the
really,
end all be all.
okay.
And it goes up to them and they look at it and they could say yes or no.
And there's not a particular recourse path. You can't go to the gatekeepers, be told no, and try to go to a different, there's no appeal.
Nope. You can sit there and beg, plead, and borrow. If they say no,
And
it's
they could
no.
turn you down because no, it looks like you were dishonorably discharged, or no, you actually, you were taken out you were taken out after 75 days and not the required 100 because for blah blah blah. So
They come up
you're
with
not going.
all sorts of
And
reasons.
they're trying to save money.
It could be because maybe somebody above them said that they want to keep everybody in for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know. It could be a handful of things.
Okay.
Um, I had one gentleman who went through their domiciliary, right, which is their inpatient side of the house, their residential side of the house. And he failed out multiple times, multiple. And they said, well, he's considered a failure. Why are we going to pay for him to go out into your facility if he can't even make it through ours? And I'm like, well, that should be a sign. That means whatever you guys are doing
Doing
isn't
isn't
working.
working.
Yeah.
Let's try something else.
Yeah, but they don't see it that way. That's just an excuse that they use. They're like, yep, well, he's not going. And I'm like, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. So you're going to allow him to continue to drink and kill himself because you're going to deem him as a failure. And instead of deeming him as a failure, you should be deeming your program as a failure for him, not him as a failure to your program.
Right, right. Not saying your program is bad, but it's not a good fit.
Right,
Right.
exactly,
Doesn't
because
work
there's no
for
cookie
him.
cutter.
Uh,
Right, so what might work for one might not work for another. So you should look for an alternative route that works best for that veteran,
yeah.
which is why veterans, again, according to the Mission Act, should always be at the head of the steering wheel, driving that bus on what works best for their treatment.
Yep. Yep. Okay. But this, and it's the people at this, these gatekeepers at the center of the web, they're called a, a medical response team,
They're the community care team.
community care team. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And it's composed of like one doctor, one RN, one psychologist. Like who are these
They're typically nurse
people?
case managers.
Okay. A nurse case manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they sometimes have a provider on there, a doctor, a psychologist,
Yep.
to kind of review it. So, but typically it's a nurse case manager, multiple nurse case managers that look over it and say yes or no.
Okay. So you take yourself to an ER reporting, let's say, suicidal thoughts and tendencies. You're also a veteran. That ER is then at some point getting in touch with that community team, or they have to get in touch with someone in between. Like, yeah, I'm just curious, like that patient or that veteran is in some sort of care, then who is bringing their problems, their challenges to the attention of the gatekeepers? Like, wow, how does that process happen?
So it really depends. So if it's suicide, uh, or suicidal ideation, they go through what we call like an HRSM or a web. They can go through a web portal where they can put all the information in. Because remember, if it's suicidal ideation acute, um, where they're actively suicidal, it it's covered by the VA.
Okay.
So they can just put in what we call like a ticket, emergency ticket, and it goes straight up and gets approved. It takes time, has a process, but it gets approved. But if it's say like they need detox and or substance use, or they're going through some kind of mental breakdown, psychosis, schizophrenia, maybe they're having hallucinations or struggling with PTSD, and it's really bad, and they're going through some kind of acute um, um, traumatic injury or something going on. They go into an ER. Um, that ER will they have to notify the VA immediately. So typically they'll call the mental health department or the social workers and let them know, like, hey, I have this veteran that is here, and just, report that he is in their emergency department.
Gotcha.
Or they'll call community care, whatever is easier, but they usually have already a point of contact in their ER of who it is that they're supposed to contact. Once they report it, then it's documented in the veteran's record. And if the ER feels that that veteran needs further care, they'll let the VA know, and the VA either take it from there, or they might contact a local facility and find out if there's treatment, a bed open locally.
Wow. So
So,
you could be stonewalled because all the people you call say, no, we're full, no, we're full, no, we're full.
right,
Shoot, there's no one in this geographical area that can take them, and
right,
there's no way to get them somewhere else. So, like that, there just may be a simple logistic block.
right. But that VA can't get him to any one of those facility, or sorry, that ER cannot get him to any one of those facilities without getting approval from the VA first.
And if they can't get that approval, they might detox them in the ER and then say, we
Then
have
they're
no
gonna
choice.
release him back out.
We have no choice to put them back on, but to put them back on the street.
Yep.
Whoa.
So then the ERs become revolving doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there any way to go around the VA, or is it if you're a veteran, the only way is a VA?
Um, there is.
There is.
So let's say the veteran has a commercial insurance. They can
Oh,
use their commercial insurance like TRICARE, Blue Cross Blue Shield. They could always go that route. Or, we find a lot of nonprofits that help. I had a gentleman, he was special forces, and I was able to reach out to the Navy SEALs Foundation, and the Navy SEALs Foundation paid for his treatment.
mm,
And so we didn't even go through the VA, didn't even bother. Um, our facility, we had one gentleman that he was, he was on the brink of on suicide. Um, and his friend called me up and said, he found my card in his house, and he mentioned that he's been talking to me and wanted to know if I could help him, and that by the time he got to him, he had the gun in his mouth.
Hmm.
And he was passed out drunk now. And he's like, "You got to help him, Val." And so I called my boss up. I said, "Look, there's got to be something we got to do for him. I don't know. I haven't been able to find any nonprofits at this moment." And he's like, "Go ahead and bring him. We'll just scholarship him." So we treated him for 45 days for free.
Gotcha.
So we just brought him in, and he's doing great. He's
that's
doing really
awesome.
good. The deal was, when he left, he said he was going to leave his apartment complex, move out of that area because that environment where he was at was part of the reason why he was drinking. So he sold his place, moved into a new area, ended up getting back with his ex-wife
Wow.
and
Wow.
his family, and lives in a new place, and he's doing amazing.
Whoa.
So,
That's
yeah.
am- that's awesome.
So sometimes it just takes a leap of faith, and
Mhm.
and he's,
Someone will write the check. Help them.
yeah, yeah. So, but that doesn't always happen. Um, but it's, again, that's why we, like me and my team, we go out and we travel and we network and we go to these conferences, because you meet some amazing people out there and a lot of nonprofits that are willing to do those type of things. So.
Do you have like any nonprofits that try to donate regularly, or is it kind of on a call basis? Like you have someone they
It's a call basis.
okay.
Yeah, it's a call basis. So just recently I met this young lady named Brandy, and she's the director over at Barracks for Heroes. Um, and what an amazing facility. So a lot of these veterans, they use what's called HUD-VASH. And that's what it's a voucher that these homeless veterans are given. And it's so that they can move into a shelter. Well, a lot of these shelters, they're sketchy and they're not really good. And then they move in with other people who might be addicts. And so they're not vetted very well
Not a
sometimes.
real change of environment.
Yeah. So this barracks um, that Brandy runs is a 20 room barracks. Um, and I mean, it's beautiful. It's so nice. It's well kept. They have inspections every morning. They all have play their part in maintaining the facility. Um, she works with the VA. They have to get their HUD-VASH voucher to live there. Um, and it's just amazing. So I have a gentleman that I've been working with for a long time. He was here, he was in Florida with me. And then he wanted to move back to Michigan where his family, and we thought that the VA would play a little bit nicer there. So me and my husband paid for his flight back there. Um, he's not doing well. He started drinking, and so he might want to come back here. So we told him about the Barracks for Heroes. And so she's gonna see if she can help him. So, but if he goes there, it's a transitioning home. So he could stay there until the VA can find him permanent housing. And this would be great for him because he's been homeless for years. And this will give him a second chance to have a, you know, a real life, you know, a real home. So,
Is PTSD most common in servicemen and women coming from combat zones, or or is it not really highly correlated with that? Or maybe it is.
um, so for my generation,
Uh-huh.
yes, combat it is.
Okay.
You know, we dealt with Iraq, Afghanistan. Um, you know, we've been in this war for years, but this generation coming in, they haven't seen war, so it's a little different for them. Um, and then you have to consider we've been, you know, even if we weren't boots on ground in Afghan and Iraq, you have those that served on ships, and so you know, we had missions out there, and then you have MST. So, I mean, it could be just not combat related. It could be,
You said that's military sexual trauma.
mhm.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Like,
um,
is that some sort of sexual misconduct between service people typically? But maybe it includes more than that?
so MST is a sexual assault that happened within the military. It could be between two service members. And
That was the tailhook scandal back from the 90s, right? Tailhook 91, I think it was.
yeah.
Yeah, was a that sort of made it very public.
Yeah, and it's gotten more public since then. And they, it's gotten real big because they started, you know, talking about it more and having classes and training. And, you know, we had the turquoise ribbon, and, you know, they thought if they talked about it more and they, you know, had trainings on it, and because, you know, you put a bunch of, you know, enlisted personnel onto a ship for like 3, 6, 9 months, right? And then you throw them out into onto a port, and they go drinking. There's going to be a sexual assault. There's going to be a rape. It always happens, unfortunately. And we would have, shoot, I think, because I was a victim's advocate on the ship, and I don't know how many times or how many of them I mentored when I was out there, and I had to, and it happened with both male and female. So,
One group more than the other, would you say, or do you actually feel it was evenly split?
female more than male. Not to
Okay,
say that it wasn't even or anything, but females are more prone to report than a male.
gotcha.
But males did report.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when you're talking about PTSD, I mean, it comes in all different forms. I mean, it could be because of combat or because of that. And multiple things. It could even be because, I mean, something, so my son has PTSD. He's going to kill me for saying this too. You know, he's got his own story, but he went to Iraq his first year, you know, and he has, you know, he saw some things. And to this day, you know, it's his story, so I'm not going to tell it, but I will tell you, you know, he doesn't deal with drones. I can't, like my son, my little one has drones that he flies around. When my oldest son comes around, we don't fly the drones. So,
It's too reminiscent of something.
right? And his incident that happened out there. So,
Gotcha. Huh. Huh. Um, I think Jordan Peterson, you're familiar with him, the Canadian psychologist. He
mhm.
once gave a talk um, and suggested that perhaps some PTSD might flow as much from things you've seen as things you've done, right? He was questioning whether or not what is called PTSD in some patients is in fact their struggles to deal with a sense of guilt over something they did while while overseas, while deployed. Do you feel that there's credence in that?
Yeah, I do. I could see that. Um, my husband struggles. My husband has PTSD.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know his whole story because he's never told me his whole story.
Hmm.
Um, but I do know one incident that happened, and it wasn't until we were working on his claim, and his buddy, in order to file for the claim, had to write a letter on the incident. Um, and it wasn't anything that he did, but it was something that he was a part of. Um, and it was supposed to be him that was going out. And instead, uh, his interpreter ended up going out instead of him. And so he has guilt from not being the one to go out, and his interpreter ended up getting blown up.
Uh-huh.
And so his PTSD, part of, I mean, there's multiple things that have happened in his career,
Right.
but that is part of it. So I do agree with that,
Yep. Yep. And maybe I sent someone to harm that
as opposed to, yeah.
that it should have been me.
Hmm.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, because that was pretty prevalent, at least in World War II, with a lot of the survivors, is they didn't know why they survived and their friends didn't, and that would
Oh,
haunt
yeah.
them for a long time.
We hear that a lot from the veterans that we take in to our clinic. Um, that survivor's guilt. Why wasn't it them? Why did, they survive and somebody else didn't? Or, it should have been them and not. So it's quite common.
For them to be expressing this grief that
Yeah.
who were we talking to, Tom? Was it Pavlos? Who was saying that America is a country that has forgotten how to grieve?
Hmm.
Ah, who was that? It was
I don't know if it was Pavlos or if it might have been Aaron. Yeah, I think it might have
mm,
been. Yeah.
That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
strong. Yeah,
Right.
it's true though. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like
Get the new pound and yeah, get the new pound and a half. Layman wings at Buffalo Wings, only 12.99 for this weekend only. Like that's our culture, right? Not not someone who knows how to regret the loss of a good, but in a way that says we can move on, but we are recognizing what we lost.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a yeah. I think it was Aaron was saying that as a culture we've lost the skill of grief.
hmm,
Wow.
Yeah,
mm,
That makes you think.
it does. It does. Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, you look. I mean, that's not on the internet, right? That's not on our social media apps. That's not on our streaming services. That's not on our televisions, right? This is not part of the culture. Whereas if you compare it to other historical cultures, the easiest one for probably Tom and maybe and coming from a Judeo-Christian background is we're familiar with the with the lament psalms from the Old Testament, right? By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept. And our captors said to us, "Sing to us songs of your nation." And we said, "How can we sing songs of joy when we're in a foreign land, right?" And so it's not good, but there's this cultural ability to deal with this. And it sounds like you're saying that one of the reasons veterans are struggling is because they don't have these cultural tools that perhaps other cultures did.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
they're out there though. It's just a matter of getting it to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because it probably seems so foreign to have someone to just talk about your things with, because that seems like at least a lot of what veterans want is just being able to talk about it. Because it's interesting how that works on psychology, just saying something out loud to someone that loves you.
Mm.
You just feel like it's kind of gone now.
It's off
When
my
you,
chest.
yeah, and it's like you're not like you're less sad from it happening, but you're almost more at peace about it for some
Mm.
reason. So if you're by yourself, then you can't really find peace sometimes, and even praying about it helps a lot, but sometimes I think God wants us to talk about it with others
Yeah.
so we can understand it maybe.
I think that I think that's true. But I think for veterans, a lot of us, um, when we get out, um, we go through this phase where we tell ourselves a lie. If we don't talk about it, it never happened.
Mm.
So we keep, and if we say it enough and then we don't talk about it, then it kind of just goes away.
Okay.
And but the problem is it just keeps festering inside
Yeah.
and festering and festering. And 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 I think from my experience, like with my PTSD, because I never treated my problem. I always like I was good at compartmentalizing and putting on this face, like this strong face, and um,
Being the chief.
yeah, being the chief. And I'm a religious person,
Oh, okay.
and, you know, but I never wanted to put my problems on anybody else, not my family, because I never wanted my family to know what was going on because I was the rock from my family, from my parents and everybody.
Yep.
And I didn't want my husband to have to deal with it, even though, he's at times saw me break down. And, uh, and, and this is me getting real with y'all, okay?
Sure.
So, I had over the years attempted suicide, because I was struggling. And then I would reel myself back in and be like, okay, I'm back to normal. And then I put on this face again. And my husband would like he'd be stuck between a rock and a hard place because he'd be like, okay, she's got a gun, she's going to kill herself. Do I report her? And then she goes inpatient, and or because he didn't know what to do. And then I'd be like, if you do it, you ruin my career. He's like, but you're going to kill yourself. And then I would be like, okay, you're right, here.
Yeah.
Like I'd come down off the ledge, and so he would never know what to do. And then I would, put on my game face, I'd come back to normal and, whatever normal was. And I'd go right back to carrying my pack and being the chief. And then I think over the years, you know, it was never that I didn't want to talk to anybody, but I didn't want anyone to know that I was struggling or that I was weak.
Yep.
So, and I had all these enlisted. At any point, I had anywhere between 20 to 500 to 1,000 enlisted that were underneath me that I had to keep alive and do a job. So I didn't have time for myself. I was always put on the back burner. And and then, in 2013, my husband was deployed, And my husband's best friend broke into the house when I was sleeping, and I got sexually assaulted.
Oh my God.
And that was rough for me. And I didn't know how to handle that. And so I blamed myself for the longest time. And then I blamed my husband. I left my husband, moved to Virginia with my kids. Um, and then it was like 2 years before me and my husband got back together. And then again, we never talked about it because if we didn't talk about it, it never happened.
Right. Right.
So, and I became, I don't know, for me, I was like, oh, I got this. I'm a strong woman. I can get through this. And then in 2019, um, I found my sailor. He hung himself. So, I had all these things that were like just adding up. And then in 2022, I got it out, and then my identity got ripped. And
Mm.
so here I thought, okay, I have this. I can manage everything. And I started drinking, I started doing drugs, I started to go down this path, and then I pulled myself back in and I started this job. And I started taking care of veterans and doing all these things, thinking, okay, as long as I take care of veterans and I take care of all these people and I help them, I'm not thinking about all the things that I need to take care of about myself. Those things didn't happen. And it worked for the longest time.
So you were able to think that you were getting better because you were readopting certain elements of your identity as being the chief again, right? Oh, I'm taking care of people. I've got these
Right.
responsibilities. I've got someone to focus my energy on. And so you were actually able to get back to a comfortable place. So you felt as if you were recovering, but there were still problems that were unaddressed.
Right. So things were still festering.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, I didn't want anyone to know that I was really dying inside.
Hmm.
So it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. And then at some point, um, I started going downhill again.
Mm.
And then about a year and a half ago, I attempted suicide again.
Hmm.
And I was by the grace of God, my husband found me
Yep.
and started CPR on me, called 911, and here I am today.
Sure.
So, and now I'm getting help, I'm getting all the things that I need. But again, bring this back to the VA,
Uh-huh.
prior to this, I was asking for help.
Yep.
I was literally telling them, there's something going on, I don't know, but I need community care, but this is what I want. And again, somebody like me that knows how to navigate a system, right?
Sure.
They, gave me the runaround. It took time. It was like 30 days. And here I am struggling, slowly going down that rabbit hole. And, um, and this is when I was in North Carolina.
Hmm.
And I told them what I didn't want. And then they set me up with this provider that I did not want. And I went to like 2 sessions. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, why would they put me with this? This is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I left. And once I moved to Florida, and it's like, now I got to start all over again. And
Hmm.
nothing was working. But it's funny because as soon as, and I wouldn't say use the word funny, but ironic, as soon as all that happened, then all of a sudden the VA is like, oh, we're going to help you. We're going to give you all these resources, which I know the VA has, right? And they're able to do all these things. Now I'm getting all the counseling, there's all these classes. I have an amazing provider, you know, and they're out there. But it took a Sentinel event
Okay.
for them to intervene and now let me be at the driver's seat to get what I need, which is crazy.
Okay.
So
So beyond the bureaucracy, beyond the ways funding is distributed, beyond even gaps in the network between whoever is seeing this veteran today and the help they need, beyond all that, there is this culture of we don't deal with anything until it's a fire and they're asking for a fire extinguisher. Like, we'll hand out fire extinguishers and we'll hand them out really quickly. But anything short of a fire,
Yeah, that's the way I see it. That's how I
wow.
felt.
And that I think is cultural. I mean, I think you and I have talked to folks about, you know, the the jobs or the industries they're in, and I think they report something similar, which is no one's responding to the need until it's an open bleeding wound, or until it's a fire, or
Right.
until it's a
Wouldn't it make
whatever.
sense to be proactive as opposed to reactive? It would
Yeah,
be so much easier to be proactive,
Mhm.
yeah,
prevent the situation from getting worse
yeah.
before the situation is
As bad as
worse.
it gets. Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder if the human hesitation is that if we are proactive and nothing happens, it's easy to say, well, you wasted your resources, you wasted the money, you wasted the time. Right? I'm not saying it's true, but like, oh, we spent all this money and we put people into all these programs, and you know what? In the end, they were fine. Nothing happened. Yeah. That
That's
was the idea.
right. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Whereas you can get more credit for, oh man, as soon as there was a problem, we were right on it. We jumped on it. We got the resources that they needed in order to address the situation, and we reacted. And no one's going to accusing you of wasting resources. That's the,
And it gives people jobs,
and again,
job security.
oof. Wow.
That's just my thinking.
Yeah. So there's financial
Yeah.
incentives. This keeps people employed.
Hmm.
Feels like the medical system too, it's all designed around critical care rather than preventative.
Yes, yes. My point exactly.
Oh, right, right.
It's like they only become good Samaritans when they see someone on the side of the road.
Ex-
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
Ooh, this is fascinating. Let's take a quick break. Yeah. All right. So my mom and dad had been married 32 years
Wow.
when they first had the waffle brain versus spaghetti brain conversation. Like, I mean, so I had an interest in psychology as a college student. I took a course, I read some books. So to me it was like, oh, yeah, women often will report that they feel as if their own brain is like a bowl of spaghetti where everything's interlinked. And men will often report that they feel that their brain is more like a waffle, or it's like I take out this box. This is the box I use to deal with my parents. And
Yes.
I play in that box. And I close that box.
Yes. And I've heard this theory.
Oh, you have. You
Yes.
have.
And I do believe in it.
So it was, yeah, it was, yes. And frankly, it makes a lot of sense to me. My parents, I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe that I had the opportunity to see them discover it like live in front of me. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, this explains everything for the last 3 decades. And my dad was like, what? You're like, my mom was like, you just, all your boxes are separate. I think there was some comedian, I forget who said, um, building on that, he said, men also have the nothing box.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. I cannot put his name on it, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Well,
It
yeah.
was hilarious.
Right, right. They'll go to the nothing box every time. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love the nothing box.
Yes. And it's like, I'll ask my husband, I'm like, what are you thinking about? And he's like, nothing.
Nothing.
I'm like, you got to be thinking about something.
Right.
He's like, yeah, nope,
Nope.
nothing.
Nope.
I'm like, well, I'm always thinking.
Yeah.
Like, ask me what I'm thinking about because I could tell you what I'm thinking. He's like, I don't even want to know.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But what you said reminded me of conversations with my mom who, like, she'll stop and be like, So how did we get here? You know what I mean? It's like conversations with her. It's like clicking through on Wikipedia. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Yes.
you start by looking up nuclear fission, and then like 3 hours later, you're reading about the development of the Barbie doll in the 1950s, and you're like, how did I get here?
Yes. My husband, like the best way to think about me is you ever look at somebody's screen, computer screen, and you have all those boxes
All the
open?
tabs.
Yes, that's me.
That's you.
Yes.
Okay. And things pop up.
Yep,
Right.
that's me.
Right.
And I'm just all over the place.
Yeah.
And
And
then
there's things wanting to download cookies, and you're like, I got to
yes.
deal with the cookies. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you ask me like where I was going with something, you seen it this morning. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know where I was going with this, and I'm
Right.
can't even remember why I was having this conversation.
Yeah.
And then half the time, like when we get into arguments, I'm like, why was I mad?
Mm.
I'm like, okay, forget it. And my husband's like, oh my, I cannot deal with you right now.
Interesting. Can you just swing the mic like 3, 4 inches closer? Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
There.
Perfect. Actually, so I'm curious about that. Like how do you and your husband resolve things that are disagreements between you? Like, do you find that you need to kind of what's the term? Like do an exterior process, like, man, I just got to sort of talk this through, and he tends to be in a more listening mode, or maybe you both need that time to externally process. I'm
Oh,
just curious.
we are completely different.
Uh-huh.
Completely. Like if you looked on the spectrum, he's on one end and I'm on the way other.
Hmm.
And it's funny because we took a marriage class and the it was with the pastor and he's like, either you guys get along amazing or it's World War III in that house. And I'm like, oh, you don't want to know.
Right, right.
But yeah, I have to talk it out, visualize it, everything. And my husband's just he gets an earful.
Hmm.
And typically he doesn't say anything
Hmm.
because sometimes, well, he's learned that if he says something, it just spirals me into something else.
Right, right. Just
So,
winds you up a little bit more.
yeah. So I do all the talking and then he'll be like, so do you want a response from me?
Testing the waters.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some wisdom there. Like, just checking. Are you looking for something? Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Another interesting thing that you mentioned is that you've done work as an EMT.
hmm
So was that during your time in the Navy or after? During.
it was in the Navy. That's actually how I met my husband.
Oh, really?
So I was a respiratory therapist, and I started teaching the EMT class, and then I would teach a portion of it, the respiratory part, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I decided to go through the training myself, and that's kind of how I met him. And we would have to go through this portion of where the training would be that you have to drive the rig and you have to go through cones, you got to park it and back it in, and I failed every single time. So I was not allowed to drive the rig at all, ever, which was okay. And then that's he worked in the ER. I worked upstairs in the ICU. And so they would call me down for a run and I would go down there. And that's actually how I met him is he was down in the rig and I got called for um, I think it was a car accident. And by the time I got back, and they used to think it was funny because they would do some crazy crap. And by the time I got back from this accident, I looked like it was Carrie. I was
Uh-huh.
covered in blood everywhere, and they hit every pothole purposely. And they're like, "What happened?" And I was like, "I'm going to kill this guy."
Right.
And he became my project. I was like, "I don't know who he is, but I'm gonna date him, and I'm gonna fix him."
Oh,
Whoa.
what's his name? Wow.
That's crazy.
But they did some awful things to me.
Hmm.
They would tell me So they had this accident of this guy that, motorcycle accident, and was coming down what we call, and we were stationed in Guam,
Hmm.
and we call it Snake Hill, and because it swerves, and they were coming down on a motorcycle and didn't have a helmet, and his head got cut off.
Separated. Yeah.
Yes. So they're like, let's call the RT and tell her that we need her to come down and do a C-spine stabilization. And so I came down.
Oh, that is a black humor.
Yeah. And so I went to go hold the head and it fell off in my hand. And then I don't remember anything after that because I hit the floor.
Wait a minute. So hold on.
Held the head
They
there.
went and picked up the pumpkin, if you will, and put it back on the scarecrow. We're
Yes.
like, all
And
right,
held it there until I came down.
Let's get Valerie over here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They've
That
done some hateful things.
that's black humor. But yeah,
That's-
exactly.
that's another
Yeah.
level.
There's black humor and then there's malicious humor.
Yeah.
Ah! Wow.
Um,
We just last week we had a motorcycle accident right here in Lander.
really?
Yeah, 20-year-old kid. Just I mean, and he was just driving down one of our local dirt roads. I mean, it wasn't like he was on the highway going 120. He was just on one of the dirt roads out of town this way and just flew off.
Oh my
That
God.
was it. It was crazy. Yeah.
Did he
Yeah.
have helmet or anything on?
No helmet. Yeah.
See.
I did talk to one of the EMTs after, and I said, like, man, would a helmet have made a difference? And he says, it's hard to say. Um, you can certainly be wearing a helmet and still have a fatal accident, of course.
Yeah.
So he said, ultimately, it's impossible to say, well, if he had only been wearing a helmet, but certainly, certainly this kid never had one on. And yeah, it was just one afternoon. It was just the call went around like, hey, yeah, 20 years old and he's gone. It's like, oh my God, yeah, just terrible. Did you let your kids ride motorcycles?
My oldest, uh, we used to take him out dirt bike riding. But he doesn't. He's okay in his truck. He's got a
Hmm.
big truck.
Got a big truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My little one, he's 14. He's more interested in playing his VR than riding motorcycles.
Mm.
But but I used to ride motorcycles. That's actually I got in a motorcycle, a bad one in 2008.
Okay.
I had a GSXR 600. No, 750. Because I remember I was going to get the 600, but everybody says either go big or go home.
And that
So
they're right.
so I went with the
And
750.
even a 750 is basically a mid-sized engine. I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. So I went with the 750 and my husband got the 1000 and we were all riding around. This was in South Carolina. So South Carolina, if you look at the roads, none of them have like the sidewalk, what do you call it?
like guardrails.
Yeah, like so if it rains, the dirt just goes into the road.
Oh,
Oh, okay. So you'll just get all this like
Yeah,
gravel and dirt
yeah.
just sloughing across the road.
And because South Carolina, they have what's called like black ice.
Hmm.
So the roads are made of coral. So when it's wet, it's like ice. You
Yeah, it's
just
super
slide.
slick. Yeah.
So we were out on our bikes, and it was a military event. It was a whole bunch of us group. Um, not really a military event, but it was a bunch of military folks out.
Military crowd.
Yeah. And it just got done raining, and I lost control of my bike. And the crazy thing is, I've been riding around with no helmet the entire time. And one of our friends was like, "Hey, Val, I got an extra helmet, put this on." And I was like, "Nah, man, I don't want to ruin my hair.
Yeah.
Like, I look good with my hair going in the wind." And they're like, "You're a dumbass.
Val,
Put this hair
put this
on."
on. Yeah.
And I can't make this up. I put it on, and 5 minutes later, I lost control of my bike. And I went across the highway, hit this ditch, and I don't know why I didn't let go of my bike, but instead I held on and throttled it and went up, cleared like this driveway, and went head on into a tree. And bike went to the left, I went to the right, and landed on top of me.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And I, when I came to, my husband said I kept repeating myself, what happened?
Hmm.
And he said, you got in a motorcycle. And I was like, I have a motorcycle? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, don't tell my dad. I don't know why. And
Wow.
so I had a concussion. I couldn't remember anything. I was out for like shoot, almost like a month and a half, 2 months where I couldn't remember anything. I had a
Sort of like
cast.
walk into the room and be like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I couldn't remember anything.
Yeah.
Um, I would go up to him. They had a board up on the house, in the house that would have the days and everything. Um, and I would go up to him and tell him stories, and he'd be like, Val, that's Law and Order. Apparently, I watched too much Law and Order. And so I'd be telling him stories. He's like, no, Val, that didn't happen. That was Law and Order. And
Whoa.
I was in a cast from here to here, and I'd
Uh-huh.
walk around, and this Biddy took me to the beach like that, and I don't even remember going to the beach, but he
Mm.
has pictures. So I'm walking around like this in a body
Oh,
cast at a beach.
Right, right.
He said I asked him to take me. I don't remember that. Um, and then
Right.
I'm
He
sitting
could be
there
making that
painting.
up. Yeah.
I'm like doing crazy things. He said I was painting the house, and I was like in a cast. Um, but um, the doctor said that if it wasn't for that helmet, either I would be a vegetable or dead.
Hmm.
And I still have that helmet, and it's cracked in half. It has a crack right in half. So isn't that
So
crazy?
rather than, yeah, so you didn't dump the bike. Your actually instinct was to hold on to it.
Yeah,
I've read these wildfire fighters have gotten into serious trouble because of the same instinct where like, okay, shoot, boys, we can't control this. Dump your gear and run. Right. And they're carrying 150 pounds of gear
yeah,
sometimes. So it's like you can't move that fast with all of it. So it's like let go of all of it. But these firefighters are, they're behind all their buddies or they're not making it to the chopper or whatever because it's like you're still trying to bring all your stuff. And apparently like there is this, maybe it's a primate instinct where it's like I don't want to let go of my tools,
yeah.
right? Not like the stuff that I need to do my job, right? And I can imagine something similar with a vehicle where you're with a motorcycle. Like I got to hold on to my bike, you know.
That's the only thing I could think of. I mean, because common sense would be let go.
Yeah, let the bike slide.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
instead I gripped it and then gave it
and just
gas.
yeah, throttled back.
So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, so after that, that bike sat in our garage. I fixed everything, put new fairings on it, everything. And then I sat there and I was like, yeah, I'm not getting back on this bike.
Hmm.
So I got back on my husband's bike, but that bike specifically, I could not get back on.
Yeah, I believe it.
So,
Yeah. I owned a bike until I was 29. Man, it was a lot of fun, but
yeah.
yeah, I laid it down. I think I laid it down once or twice. So I wouldn't even say it was an accident, but like, I just hit a little slick spot or just tried to take a turn too hard and, just had it slip out from under me. Um, but yeah, when then I was 29 going on 30, I was moving and I just was like, it's, it's time to give it up. But man, you see that guy like on these highways, especially in the summer, right? You got these big, huge highways that run past these beautiful mountain canyons, right? And you're like, man, it'd be nice to get back on that Indian Scout and just cruise around here. But yeah, they are also dangerous. That's
They are. And I don't even know, like now I probably could get back on a bike.
hmm
But it's not me I'm worried about, it's everybody else.
right.
Because people just drive so crazy.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah, right. And think, yeah, think when. you were growing up, maybe people were messing with the radio, and
Yeah,
that is a
you had,
distraction.
yeah,
But now people have this little dopamine box in their right hand, and
yeah,
they're
and
texting.
texting and
Yeah,
writing down.
yeah,
So,
we've all been guilty of it.
shoot, I try not to do it with my kid in the car because he's the first to point it out.
Right. All right. Fine. You text these people.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I got my son, his first vehicle, my oldest. I made sure it was a standard
Hmm.
because I'm like,
Oh, that's smart.
he's too busy shifting.
Yep.
So, and
Yep.
it worked. He
Yep.
never could text.
Yep.
So he always had it in a glove box and he was too busy shifting.
Yep.
So I told my youngest, I said, guess what, buddy? You better learn how to shift because you're not getting an automatic.
That's great.
That
I
is
like
really
that.
smart. It's funny you mentioned that because I drove semi for a farmer for a couple seasons, and it was funny because my brother also worked for the farmer. And my brother was like, "Why are you never responding to text, Tom?" And I was like, "I thought I'm not supposed to text and drive." Like, not on a farm. We're supposed to keep doing both. So here I am trying to learn how to drive a semi and texting and shifting. I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
It's like if you could do that, you got some skills.
Right. Well, yeah, it took a while because I kept killing the truck, but figured it out finally.
Yep.
But I was just like, "This is not what they told us in school."
Wow. But you were out on the road?
Hmm.
Oh, okay. It
Yeah.
wasn't like you were just in a field where you're like,
Yeah.
I ran over the wrong piece of corn.
Yeah, right.
Eh, fine.
Yeah. I
Right.
was like on the highway because they're like telling you where to go or what you need to be doing. So like you have to be updated so you don't go the wrong spot. And they're counting on you because the machines are going and everything.
Yep.
So you're just like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, farming, that farming equipment itself can be dangerous. My uncle, great uncle Guggs, and his name was Guggs, North Dakota, um, was driving a combine across probably a sugar beet field. And those, these big combines, the feeders can get jammed, but yeah, it's just sort of cutting corners. People don't want to slow down, so they just jump out of the moving combine. It's going 3 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah, they jump out of the moving combine. Again, I mean it's going slow, but then they try to clear the jam manually without shutting the machine off because again, they're trying to beat daylight or whatever. So anyway, so he's driving it, his son's in the car, his son's in the combine, they get a jam. Son jumps out, goes to clear it. They've got the stick, right? They're trying to clear it with the stick. Stick doesn't work. And so it's like, well, if I just reach in, I could. So he reaches in and his hand gets stuck. So now he's walking backwards with his hand stuck in the combine. And my uncle Guggs is like, well, what the hell in tarnation are you doing in there? Like, Dad, I'm stuck. So Guggs gets out of the combine. And yeah, North Dakota farmer, like, well, if one hand is stuck in there, maybe sticking my hand in there, we'll get it unstuck.
No.
So he's like, all right, here. He reaches in, his hand gets stuck. So now the two of them are walking backwards in this driverless combine, just like looking over their shoulder and being like, well, that ditch is coming up pretty quick, isn't it? So they're yelling and hollering, trying to attract the attention of any neighbor driving down the road. Yeah. So they're yelling and hollering and blah, blah, blah. And eventually a neighbor does come by a few minutes later. And, again, they're looking over and be like, we're going to reach that ditch sooner or later. Um, and the neighbor rolls down the truck window, like, what's wrong? They're like, get help. So another North Dakota farmer rolls up his window, drives halfway down the road, stops, puts it in reverse, backs all the way up, rolls his window back down, and says, don't go anywhere.
You gotta be kidding me.
Don't go anywhere. Like, we're not going anywhere. We're stuck. So anyway, they eventually found someone who knew how to get in the machine, stop the machine, and they got unstuck, and everyone kept all their fingers.
wow.
Yeah, they were extremely lucky, but
Yeah, that could have ended very badly.
oh my gosh, yeah, exactly. Oh, it could have gone south, but yeah, but Uncle Guggs had been cheating death his whole life. I mean, He was once working in a ditch and the ditch collapsed, um, and just buried him, just buried him under tons of dirt. And people were there, they helped dig him out, but he clawed his way out. They brought him to the hospital. Doctors look at him and say, "Oh, he's never walking again." And Uncle Guggs was like, "Well, I don't care what the doctors say." Walked out 3 days later. Yeah, he was a tough old coot, Yeah, he was a stout guy. So, yeah, yeah, it was good. So, how did we get on this?
No, yeah.
Yeah. I'm Valerie, I'm curious with the work that you're doing, do you see yourself doing it for the next, 10 years? This is how you want to finish your career, or you're like, no, this is a transition to something on a more national level. I want to be doing advocacy for vets, but in a different way. What's your vision for this?
So I'm on a 5-year plan.
Okay.
Um, I figured this is a startup company. We're working on, of course, growing. I want to help them grow and become successful. Um, but I have, like me and my husband are talking about um, creating a website. So I want to be able to finish this and then retire in about 5 years. Because it really is exhausting. I get calls all hours of the night. I got to talk veterans off the ledge, beat down doors. And, I love what I do, but I want to be able to, again, make this place successful and then pass on the torch. Um, but the goal is we have a lot of chiefs in the military that are committing suicide, believe it or not. Um, as leaders,
These are top ranked, non-enlisted.
yes,
Okay.
top ranked enlisted,
Enlisted.
yes. And a lot of them are committing suicide. A lot of them, are putting out messages, letting people know that they feel alone and they're struggling. And so me and my husband have this idea that we want to create like a website. You know how when you go on to Yelp and you could put in something that you're searching for and it'll populate on the map, put on these pins on a map. Well, we want to create something like that for chiefs across the US. And the Chiefs Mess is what we're called, is the largest network across not just the military, but across the US. Um, and so when you retire, you can go in there, put your information about where it is that you are retiring, and what your NEC is. So an NEC is like say you might be a corpsman, a medic, or maybe you do maintenance, or maybe you're aviation, or maybe um, your gunner's mate, or boatsman's mate. And this way you can find your community. So if you want to stay within the medic community, the corpsman community, you can stay within the corpsman community. If you want to stay within the aviation community, you can stay within the aviation community. And then what I'll do, you'll look for it and it'll drop all the pins. And then this way, so say if I want to look for in Clearwater, Florida, it'll drop the pins and you can see you're not alone. And you can reach out to them and you can connect.
And this is just where other people are living.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what I found is what me and my husband have found, because I've been out since 2022. My husband's been out for a year. And, we meet people and we've come across people and we're kind of, friended people, but we don't hang out with anybody. Um, like our neighbors are amazing, but we haven't really hung out with them. And a lot of that is because it's not the same thing as hanging out with other veterans,
Hmm.
where you can connect and tell stories and relate.
There's not that common frame of reference.
Yes, yes. So like when we lived in North Carolina, our neighbor, she was Army. The couple down the road was Navy and Marine. And every weekend we get together and we'd have a barbecue and we could sit there and talk about Afghanistan.
Right.
and some of the stories and some of the stuff that we've seen, and sometimes it was some funny stuff that we talked about, and
Sure.
sometimes it's some crazy stuff, you know, but it's relatable and we understood each other and it was just a common bond, right?
Right. Right.
And we don't have that here. And like I said, we don't like going to the VFW or the American Legions. And so then we found out on Facebook uh, that there were some friends that just retired and they're 15 minutes up the road from us. And we had no idea.
Wow.
And then we found out that there was about 2 hours from us, there's another one of my friends from years ago. But that's the thing, there's so many people all around us, we just don't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought if we created a network, then we can connect with so many more people and start, getting together and building that camaraderie again and be
Sure.
able to barbecue. And, there's probably so many people around us and we have no idea that they're there
Yep.
because nobody reaches out because
Right.
we put
Well, people
ourselves
don't
on that
walk down their
island.
own, people don't walk down the street anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. That was one of the remarkable things that I actually found very attractive about all my time in Central America, right? Is that every little neighborhood has a little corner store where you go for beans, milk, dairy, fruit, and vegetables, right? So neighbors really see each other. It's a more exterior culture anyway because it's just so warm down there, right?
Right.
So you can be outside. Yeah, any time of the year. But it's also a more pedestrian culture. And so you just see people coming and going. And so like, yeah, there's kind of mangy dogs and dirty roads and not all the buildings are super well kept up, but you'll walk down and you feel as if you feel very comfortable because it's pedestrian focused. So you're not dodging traffic.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would try to explain this to people back home, like, why do you like these like sort of backwater villages in Central America, like when they don't have modern amenities. Yeah,
Yeah.
the roads are like fist size gravel. That's your road, right? And I'm like, yeah, but you have something that you just don't have in America, and you have this neighborhood feel.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But you're trying to basically compensate for that with this network where people can just say, oh, who is here that I may not see just walking down the street, but now I can look on my phone and, oh, there they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're only 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, they could go on to Facebook and be like, oh, look, Val's in Florida. Let's connect with her. But people don't do that. They don't think about, we put ourselves on an island sometimes and we do it, it's self-induced,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and you don't think to go and look on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or just reach out and say, hey, who's in Florida, right? We just automatically just isolate ourselves and go, well, maybe somebody will find us, or maybe I'll find somebody. And we
Yeah,
don't. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to build this system
sure.
and I'm going to make everyone get connected and we're
Oh.
just going to, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but we'll see.
You mentioned earlier that you said you're getting calls from vets who are maybe in this critical moment. Is that
Mhm.
because you give them your card, right? So they're the name that they can call, right? So they're not calling 911. They're not calling a hospital. They're like, I'm calling Valerie. That's why you're getting calls at 1 in the morning.
Uh, yes, some of them have my card because they know me, or they've gotten my card or my information from another veteran,
Oh, okay.
or they found my flyer somewhere.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Here's someone who understands.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so they'll give me a call um, and they'll just tell me that they've got some, that they're struggling and can I help them?
Right.
And
What do
so,
you're on the phone, someone's talking about ending it all. Do you ask questions? Do you say, "Hey, tell me what's on your mind?" Like how do in that first 30 seconds, how do you sound someone out of how you can help them?
Well, typically, you know, as soon as I answer the phone and they ask me who, if I'm Val and I say, yeah, and they'll tell me who they are and they'll just kind of, um, they just start rambling on,
Okay.
and I just listen and then I say, okay, well, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do for you?
Yep.
And then they tell me what it is that they're looking for.
Okay.
And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just talk and I just listen.
Yep.
Um, and then sometimes I'll tell them, be like, well, if you let me, I can help you.
Okay.
So, and then we kind of just go from there.
Yep.
And sometimes we're on the phone for 15 minutes, sometimes it's hours. So it just
You
depends.
take that call. You don't know if you're getting sleep that night.
Yeah. And I've gotten calls
Whoa.
from Germany, and those calls, because you consider the time difference.
Yep.
So I could be up all night long.
Right. Because they're 8 hours ahead of us, right?
Yeah, it's a huge time difference.
It's exhausting.
So I know like 9 o'clock in the morning, it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon there.
Yep.
So
Oh, wow. God bless you. That sounds exhausting because you get on the phone with someone, you just don't know how much they need. So,
and a lot of times they're inebriated.
sure.
So then I gotta be careful what I say because they take what you say, they can take what you say out of context.
Right. Right.
So typically I just let them do all the talking and I say very little.
Okay.
And I'll just let them know, like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to do what I can to help you if you allow me to.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. Wow. I'm assuming you have moments when you've been the right person for the right problem and you can feel that, yes, I brought someone back. Um, does that does that give you energy? Is that something that you even spend a lot of time reflecting on?
it is. It's a very humbling moment.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's a reminder of why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And it's those small wins that that keeps you going because you have a lot more um, doors that slam in your face and no's that you get. So when you're able to accomplish the wins and be able to talk somebody off the ledge and get them into the help,
Yep.
you take that and you're like, okay, yes, I can keep doing this.
Sure.
We got this.
Sure. This gives me energy for a few more.
Yeah,
But that also is what motivates your belief that, okay, our problem is not, it's not that we don't have people who can take the call and talk to the person who's on the edge. Those people are there, they're motivated, they're willing to help. The problem is that we are not addressing these issues proactively. And so
yes,
people are ending up on the ledge who don't need to be there.
exactly.
Yeah. So am I correct in thinking that you want your legacy to be not only did she help these individuals, but also you helped rewrite the script on how we approach this area of service to our servicemen?
Exactly. That's well said.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
but there's a lot of work to be done.
Uh-huh.
A
Hmm.
lot. Um, and it really it starts with, and I think we're heading in that direction, with the administration that we have.
Okay.
Um, but you have a lot of people in the VA. Like I said, you have a lot of good people, but you also have a lot of people that are stopping it for whatever reason.
Okay.
So, and preventing the process from working the way it's supposed to.
Okay. So even the parts of the system that are reasonably functional can be blocked by someone with either stupidity or malicious intent.
Yes, and
Yeah.
there are people out there with malicious
Yeah.
intent.
I think that's I just read a book. I think it was called In Sheep's Clothing. It was about covertly aggressive people. And the thing that the psychologist was very keen to make his audience understand is if you are a genuine, caring, supportive person, you really have to you have to convince yourself that there are people who think differently and there are people who think maliciously. And he's like, that's one of the biggest weaknesses of good people is that
Oh,
they don't really think that anyone would actually do something wicked. It's like he's like you have to get to that understanding so that you can more uh, you can better understand the breadth of human behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mm.
Yeah.
yeah, that's bananas. Yeah, so
I might need to send Doge into the
yeah.
VA.
Doesn't seem like anything's not on the chopping block for them. So you said your next project is opening a new facility back in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm
And what's the
opening.
name of that one?
It's also First Dawn.
First Dawn.
Yeah, First
Okay,
Dawn.
First Dawn. Okay. If if anyone who's listening was to be interested in learning more about what you guys do or even helping, like where's the first place you would send them?
They can just reach out and contact me.
Okay. So I guess we can put some contact info in the description for the episode.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can just have them call me or email me.
Yeah.
Be more
Yeah.
than happy to provide any information or resources that they need. Um, we should be opening up the first week of April.
Okay.
So it's outpatient, veterans, of course, veteran focused. And then shortly after, I'm opening up a sober living and then a residential.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So small census residences along with
Yep.
outpatient facilities.
Yep.
Okay. And this is a business. I mean, people are like investing in this, like or is this a nonprofit platform?
No, it's for profit.
It is for profit.
Definitely for
Okay.
profit. Yep.
Gotcha. Well, that does drive out certain inefficiencies I've found. I mean,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it is remarkable how the nonprofit world can be, lots of good intentions, but it can also harbor inefficiencies at times. So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
good, wonderful. Well, Valerie, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Well, we hope that you'll endure the cold and dry air of Wyoming with with enough enjoyment to return at a future time, and we'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the next time it's a little bit warmer. So,
Summertime.
yes.
Yeah.
Preferably.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Valerie.
All right. Thanks, guys.